This time, we're gonna be taking the ancient Japanese technique of Kintsugi to the next level and making a white concrete table that I'm gonna call a Kintsugi Canyon. So traditional Kintsugi is a process where you take a broken plate or bowl or other object, you glue the broken pieces back together, and then you fill the cracks in the repaired piece with gold leaf to turn those defects into a beautiful aesthetic feature. Now I got to thinking, maybe you don't have to break anything to do Kintsugi. So I've done a number of projects where I create organically shaped voids in concrete, and I think it'll be really cool to create a gleaming white concrete table with a huge canyon down the middle, and then coat the inside of those voids with gold leaf, produce what I think I'm gonna call a Kintsugi Canyon table. Since I've never done anything with gold leaf and concrete before, first thing we're gonna do is do a miniature version of this table to get the hang of it and make sure it'll work. I've got this mold here with the foam canyon knockout. We're gonna mix up some concrete, pour this, and see how it goes.
Whenever I do something entirely new, like gilding concrete with gold leaf, I always like to do a miniature version of the project just to uncover any issues that might arise. In this case, I had to learn the whole gold leafing process. I wasn't sure how it would interact with the concrete, and I found one problem I hadn't foreseen at all. When I use foam in concrete molds, I typically remove it by just dumping acetone on it to melt it away, but I've never done that with white concrete, and as you can see here, the melted foam turns the acetone a pink-purple color that totally stained the white concrete. I'm so happy I didn't learn this lesson by staining and ruining the 200-pound coffee table that I'm about to build.
Yeah. So we got acrylic adhesive. Basically, I think we're just supposed to spread it in the cracks there.
And after covering the surface where you want the gold leaf, you let the adhesive sit for about an hour till it's tacky, and then you can just kind of gently brush the gold leaf onto the surface. I ran into a little issue here because it seemed like the adhesive was soaking into the unsealed concrete, so there were spots where the gold leaf just didn't stick. I think when we do the big table, we can avoid having to do these patches by simply sealing the concrete before we do the gold leaf process.
I am really happy with these results, and I think we are go to move on to the real deal.
To create molds for the canyon and crevices in the table, we're gonna make the inverse of those canyon and crevice shapes out of pink foam insulation. So the first step is just cutting down the pieces of foam and gluing them together into a big block that we can carve our inverse canyon shape out of. With the foam block made, I started by sketching out the shape of the canyon rim, basically the shape you're gonna see exposed at the top of the table. And after a few iterations, I came back with a red marker to mark the final shape I wanted, which actually ended up splitting the canyon into two sections. So to make that, I ended up cutting the block in two.
It ain't pretty, but it'll do the job.
With the shape of the canyon rim sketched out, I could take the foam blocks over to the bandsaw to remove the bulk of the material around the shape of the rim. I could then sketch and rough cut out the side profile for the canyon form. And while this side sketch kind of looks like the profile of mountaintops, it's actually going to be the ravine of the canyon in the final table because this form is the inverse shape of the canyon in the final table. I used the combination of a hot wire foam cutter, a rasp, and a sanding block to get the foam knockouts to their final shape.
We got a shape we generally like, but there's still a lot of defects in the surface, and we want this a little bit smoother so that the gold leaf will go on easier. Got some joint compound. Just use a spreader and my hands to just massage that joint compound in and get this all nice and smoothed out. We're gonna coat these with some resin just so that they've got a nice waterproof finish and will come away from the concrete more easily. We got our yellow mountains, which will be canyon when upside down. Now I'm just gonna give a rough sanding to the edge, probably like 320 grit, just to even it out and give it a little bite so that when we spray concrete onto this, it'll stick and won't just run off.
With the foam knockouts done, I got to work breaking down the pieces of melamine that we're going to use to make up the sides and bottom of the form. And I was pretty excited to discover that my local Menards had some black melamine. Y'all know I'm usually more of a Home Depot guy, but the black melamine when we're doing white concrete, yeah, that is worth the extra drive just because I think it's going to look so much cooler. Next up, assembling the form. The first step was to position the canyon knockouts exactly where I wanted them and trace some murder scene outlines around the knockout. Then I removed them and added double-sided tape to the bottom. And then with that murder outline I'd done of the knockouts, I could place the knockouts perfectly with the double-sided tape to secure them to the base of the form.
I think it's gonna be easier to caulk the knockouts on the sides here before we put the form together. So we're gonna do that real quick and then assemble the form.
And now it's time for another episode of Caulk Talk, which is the same as every episode of Caulk Talk.
I apply a layer of pastebox to the melamine, lay down a generous layer of 100% silicone caulk, run a metal fondant ball tool over all the caulk lines. Metal fondant ball tool pushes excess caulk to the sides, leaves a clean line over the seam, and the layer of pastebox makes it easy to peel the excess caulk away once it cures, leaving a perfect caulk line. And that's it for this episode of Caulk Talk.
It is concrete day, always very exciting, always very nerve-wracking. We got all the concrete mix batched out. As usual, we'll be spraying a face coat and then hand packing the back coat. So let's get this mixed. We put in these ribs here. That helps keep the weight down. Also, these are gonna give us a little platform. So right now we're gonna go cut some steel tube and then have a couple steel tubes that run across there. Those steel tubes give us a spot to attach the wood base to the concrete top. Before we go further, a quick sponsor message. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, lower your bills, and manage your money better. So I wish I tried Rocket Money earlier. I just found out about it, downloaded it, gave it a shot, and within minutes, I'd saved over $60 a month by canceling subscriptions. It's super easy to set up on your phone. You just download it, you link your accounts, and it does its thing, finding all the subscriptions and listing them in one place so you can see everything you're paying. I was shocked to see I was paying $30 a month for Adobe products, and anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge DaVinci Resolve fan, so there was no way I was doing anything with Adobe. It turns out I downloaded some free stock photos a few months ago, and that had somehow signed me up for $30 a month for eternity with Adobe. And then I also found a Norton antivirus subscription for $35 a month. I don't use Norton antivirus on any computers I own. I don't even have it installed. So this was also a shock, but with Rocket Money, I was able to cancel both these subscriptions, save myself $65 a month. And that's part of their free features. With a premium subscription, Rocket Money can actually go out and cancel those subscriptions for you. This is super helpful, especially when companies create a bunch of loopholes and make it super difficult to figure out how you're gonna cancel your subscription. Rocket Money can also help you analyze your spending habits, set up monthly budgets, monitor your spending by category, and send you notifications to help you manage your budget better. Rocket Money has helped its customers save over $500 million in canceled subscriptions to date, so don't keep throwing your money away. Rocket Money is free to download, so you've got nothing to lose. Give it a try. The whole process from signing up to getting those subscriptions canceled took less than 10 minutes. Now is the time to join over 5 million people who are using Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Medustrial or follow the link in the description below to get started today for free. That's rocketmoney.com/Medustrial to get started for free. Thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to it. A few days later, and let's see what we got. Looks pretty darn nice and dry. That's good. That's pretty good. Time for the solo flip here. This is always fun. This one's probably about 200 pounds, so we gotta be careful. Okay. Whew. I calculate right the width, yeah. Oh yeah, we got a real nice surface on this one. Heck yeah.
Now, because of the undulating shape of the foam canyon knockout, it was a bit tricky to remove. And as I learned on the sample, using my acetone trick to melt the foam was not a good idea with the white concrete. So I basically just had to hack and pry the foam knockout out bit by bit until I got to the very end where the last chunk popped out a bit easier. It took about an hour to get the main canyon knockout removed, but fortunately the smaller knockouts came out much easier. With the knockouts removed, it's time for processing, and to get a nice even color, I gave the whole table a light wet sanding at 240 grit.
Next thing we got to do here is mix up a slurry coat and fill in some of the voids inside of the canyon here, just because we want a pretty smooth surface for the gold leaf to go against.
I let the slurry coat dry overnight, then sanded it off camera and applied a few coats of sealer to the concrete. And if you recall, in my experiment, I had some issues where it seemed like the adhesive for the gold leaf was soaking into the concrete. So my hope here is that by sealing the concrete before the gold leaf, and it'll make the application of the gold leaf a bit easier. Before we get to the gold leaf, it's time to build the wood base that this concrete is going to sit on. The inside of the base is basically going to be a plywood box that attaches to those steel bars and will support 200 pounds. Then the box is going to be wrapped in some hard maple that will give the base the exact same footprint as the concrete top. While the glue on the box was drying, I turned my attention to ripping down and milling the figured maple boards that are going to wrap around the base. So this is basically like making a really thick picture frame. Nothing too fancy, but I don't think we want anything too ornate because the top with the gold leaf is going to be the showstopper in this piece. Now we're not going to attach those sides to the base just yet because first I wanted to fit that plywood box to the rods in the steel base.
So put in the corners. Here, get this.
Okay, like that's when you start sliding. It's fine.
Okay. We got to drill the holes in the steel so that we can attach the base to this. That's going to be easiest to do upside down, which is why we're doing it before we get to the gold leaf. Markers go in the hole and are going to help us drill a perfectly matching hole in the other one.
Now, if you're wondering why I didn't just drill through the plywood and straight through the steel in one pass, it's because I made a mistake. Those plywood strips running across the bottom of the box prevent me from drilling through from the underside. So that's why I had to go through this whole process to transfer the hole locations from the steel to the top of the plywood so they could then drill the holes from the top of the plywood to match.
I think we probably want to go ahead and assemble this. Let's make sure everything lines up right. And once we know everything lines up right, then I can just go ahead and glue these pieces on. All right, and we'll just spread this a little more evenly. But again, it doesn't need to be like full coverage. We'd rather have minimal squeeze out. Okay, boom.
Now it's finally time for the gold leaf. The first step here was masking off all the surfaces adjacent to the voids that we're going to be filling with gold. The gold leaf adheres wherever you paint on the adhesive, so this painter's tape will prevent adhesive and thus the gold leaf from getting in spots we don't want it. I'll also note that in these clips here, I'm applying the adhesive a bit too thick. A little of this goes a long way. You want just enough to coat the surface, but not more.
So the adhesive has been setting up for about an hour. I'm gonna get the tape off and get the gold leaf on. We'll take the rest of the tape off the easy way. All right, here goes nothing. It's time for some gold.
So overall, gold leaf is very easy to apply. The main thing to note is that it is super staticky. It will want to just cling against the surface with the glue, and once it touches the adhesive, it's stuck. So you gotta wear some rubber gloves and use some tweezers to try to gently position the sheets into place. Once it's adhered, you use a brush to kind of dust it into the surface and flatten it out. But I'll also note that on bigger sheets, I got to the point where I actually was able to use my gloved hands to press the gold leaf into the surface pretty darn well. So while I'm certainly no expert at gold leafing, it seems like one of those things you just gotta get your hands in there, play with it, and you'll figure out a way that works.
Pretty happy how this whole gilding process came out. By the way, if you guys are wondering, I don't want to try to pull a fast one. This actually is an imitation gold leaf. It would have cost somewhere between like $1,000 and $1,500 to use real gold leaf in here. I am going to put this up for sale on my website, and there will be an option for the purchaser to upgrade.
Expensive upgrade.
To real gold. It's easy enough to sand this down, put a layer of real gold on it. And I did some tests, and honestly, like to my eye, I can't even really tell a difference between the inexpensive fake stuff and the real stuff with the leaf. So I figured for purposes of this experiment, the imitation stuff was good as a proof of concept. So now we got to take this up, take the base upstairs, we'll get it assembled, and do the beauty shots. And while assembling, I do want to talk a little bit about the design and some things I learned. So I'm really happy with the split canyon shape. What I don't like as much are the side knockouts. I think I probably could have just done without those. The placement just doesn't feel quite balanced. But on the bright side, with the coffee table, you're only going to see one side, and that's one of the reasons that I decided to do the knockouts on one side and have the opposing side clean with no knockouts. That way, if I didn't like how the knockouts look, then you just use the other side as the front. And obviously, taste differs, so if someone really likes the knockouts in front, they can flip it around, and that becomes the front of the table. So if you like this and want more experimental design and build projects, make sure you sub and bell. It would mean a lot to me as we're closing in on 1 million subscribers. As always, thank you for watching, for sticking around. It means so much to me. That's it for this time, and I'll see you guys next time.